All right, I've got 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Bell, and I'm the Communications Coordinator for the Florida Wildflower Foundation. We're so happy to have you joining us for our webinar, The Flora of the Southeastern United States Project, Flora Apps and Tools for Better Botany. We'd love for everyone to say hi in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. For those of you not familiar with our organization, our mission is to protect, connect, and expand native wildflower habitats through our education, research, planting, and conservation programs. Our work is made possible primarily through the sales and renewals of the Florida State Wildflower License Plate. These funds, along with donations and memberships, allow us to support and create projects that build awareness and knowledge of native wildflowers and plants throughout Florida. This year, we're celebrating 25 years of the plate being on the road. We'd like to encourage those of you who find our programs valuable to consider becoming a member, making a donation, or purchasing the State Wildflower License Plate. And if you purchase or have the Wildflower Plate, you're eligible for a membership. So just let us know you have the tag and we'll get you set up in our database. Be sure to check out our website for resources on planting and growing wildflowers, to learn where to see wildflowers in bloom, for upcoming events, and more. We're also on social media, and you can find us on most platforms at FLA Wildflowers. Our next webinar will be November 19th, the Seeds of Knowledge Demonstration Garden Grant, presented by our Roadsides and North Florida Programs Coordinator, Marina Mertz. She'll give an overview of our newest grant program, the Seeds of Knowledge Library Demonstration Garden Grant, using libraries to showcase native plants and pollinators they attract to a large and potentially unfamiliar audience by way of small native plant demonstration landscapes. So this webinar will provide an overview of how to apply and also give you an opportunity to ask questions. Stay tuned as well for many great field trips coming up. Our next field trip to St. George Island State Park is currently sold out, and our November field trip to the UNF Nature Trails is now open to the general public. For that trip, you can join me as we walk along the banks of Lake Oneida in search of late fall blooming terrestrial orchids, and there's quite a few there that we're hoping to see. And then be sure, if you want to get early access to all of our field trips throughout the year, to sign up as a Florida Wildflower Foundation member. We also wanted to highlight some great fall events coming up. Tomorrow, the Tar Flower FMPS chapter will be hosting Backyard Biodiversity Day at Mead Botanical Garden in Winter Park, and we'll be there. We'll also be at the Fall Horticultural Expo and Plant Market in Alachua County, hosted by the Gainesville Garden Club and the Alachua County Master Gardeners. On November 8th, the Florida Museum's Daniel Lab will be hosting a native plant giveaway at the Sumter County Fairgrounds in Bushnell, and this is part of their Plant for Pollinators program, which we have partnered with and supported this year. So again, just be sure to follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, or check out flawildflowers.org/events to stay abreast of all of our upcoming opportunities. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we get started. All attendees are muted with cameras off. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature to submit them. The chat is active, but we don't monitor it for questions. So you've got to use that Q&A. We will address questions at the end of the talk as time permits, but you can also email questions to info@flawildflowers.org. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website and YouTube channel sometime early next week. When it's available, you will receive an email from us with a link to the recording, along with a resource page and links from the webinar. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Scott Ward is a research botanist at North Carolina Botanical Garden, working for the Flora of the Southeastern United States project with Alan Weakley, Michael Lee, and UNC-Chapel Hill Herbarium staff. Scott has broad experience working in botany and vegetation ecology across Eastern North America, with research experience in wetlands and community ecology in the Great Lakes region, rare plant demography and fire ecology in Central Florida, and botanical education and taxonomic research in North Carolina and the broad Southeastern United States. Originally from the Finger Lakes of New York, Scott earned his BS and MS in plant ecology from SU New York Brockport, studying how lianas, I'm sure I'm saying that right, woody
lianas, yeah.
thank you, and native and non-native congeneric species of the same genus, interact in forested habitats. In addition to many engaging opportunities within his current position at NCBG, Scott is particularly interested in making technical botany accessible by creating functional dichotomous keys, comprehensive flora information, and aggregating tens of thousands of diagnostic plant photographs for use not only by botanists and career ecologists, but also by a wide range of non-professional and hobby naturalists. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Scott. And while we are switching over our screens, I'll just note that we're very excited to have him today. Scott, as well as Alan Weakley and the folks from the Flora of the Southeast have just been doing incredible work to make all this information more accessible. So we're so excited to have him here to share that with us. So Scott, if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. How are we looking?
Looks good. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah. And can you hear me pretty well?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. If I move around or anything, feel free to just let me know. So thank you for that intro, Emily. It's a good review of all the things that have happened in the past, 10, 15 years. I actually was thinking about the other day. I started learning plants when I was around 16 or 17. I mean, American Beech, for instance, was the first tree I learned. I was 16. And so about half my life, a little bit more than half my life now, I've been learning plants. And so it's nice sometimes to take a step back and think about the ways that, botany could be presented in ways that are really understandable. So yeah, in a way, this is sort of a botany is easier than you think talk or demystifying flora use. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So of course, I have to preface this by saying everyone here in Florida is aware of the development pressure that, especially in the peninsula. I lived in this area of Florida for a couple years, and it was really wild to see the changes that were the amount of development that was happening at such a rapid scale. So, for instance, this is northwest of Myakka River State Park, and you can see people probably recognize celery fields here. A lot of the Lakewood Ranch development, where again I needed an apartment to live, so like I lived in this area. I understand that like it's difficult, it's difficult to find housing in some parts of Florida too. So it's not like the housing isn't needed, right? But I just looked at this map the other day, and a lot of this development on the outskirts of, west of Myakka City and Myakka River State Park I don't even recognize it. I remember driving through this area a lot. So, just a reminder that, there's a sort of the barrel that we're looking down as far as the future of Florida. I also think, on a landscape level, and this isn't just Florida, so I'm not singling out Florida here, but on a landscape level, I think humans really could rethink not only the scale at which we're developing, but maybe the design, right? And also redefining what we consider beautiful. Also, I had to put that arrow there. Even in this picture, I think those are date palms, which are not native to Florida. So again, I'm not a palm expert, but I don't see a ton of native plants that have been intentionally introduced here. Also, a lot of these strips, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here. A lot of these highway corridors, Florida DOT, Florida Wildflower Foundation, Florida Native Plant Society, these are all organizations thinking about how we can redefine these in efficient ways, but also in more ecologically sound ways. We can also take cues from native plant communities, right? This is no secret. People have been doing this for a while in Florida. Nancy Bissett, owner of the Natives in Davenport, has been taking these cues for years and is able to, grow native plant communities in very harsh, xeric scrub sites, right? And that's by mimicking and not, ignoring, right? There's all sorts of resources. You can find these on YouTube, which is just one of the best apps in my opinion, even though there's a lot of, maybe trash on there too, but there's a lot of really good educational resources. And then, here's one that highlights wild design instead of this sort of artificial kind of human design, right? So we don't have to look far to take hints from Florida's natural areas. I mean, this is one of my favorite pictures. This is Lytris tenuifolia, one of the sandhills, gay feathers, right? Blazing stars. They really just pop like crazy in the fall, especially in sandhills that burned in the spring, the previous spring or summer, sorry, of the year. So, half a year later, you can see landscapes completely come to life, even after prescribed burns. So these are resilient communities. They're used to, disturbance. And I think, again, we could be learning from these in a lot of ways, especially as more proportion of natural area is converted to suburban or urban landscapes. Fire too, I'll talk a little bit about this. This is in a place that I did a floristic study, currently still unpublished, but of course, if I just could have a few minutes here and there to work on it. But this is from Carter Creek on the Lake Willis Ridge, and 600 to 700 plant species, 20 species of beak sedge alone. So very diverse ecosystems, lots of different habitats, and most of those reliant on regular fire, right? And then, of course, thinking about this sort of urban wildland interface, there's a great, set of resources, right, that have already been in development. So again, preaching to the choir, many of y'all know about this, but we're rethinking about, the species that we'd like to maybe see even on our drives, right? And multiple species too. I was really pleased to see this earlier. Solidago stricta, fistulosa, chapmania. So many species mentioned on these brochures, and it's really great to see regionally, in central North Carolina, even in western New York or central Florida, this increased awareness of the potential use of native plants. So yeah, botany, and just to back up a little bit, just to give a little bit more background here, because Emily, thank you so much for the intro, but it's I'm certainly guilty of being a little bit wordy sometimes. So here's just some nice pictures to kind of show how botany as a career has been for me. And all of these pictures were taken in Florida, even this one up here. I think I was 19 on like one of the best school trips of my life. This was a really nice live oak at Highlands Hammock that has since been, I think Irma kind of whacked it in the last end, but it just was really cool to see some of these communities and then come back and be able to actually work and do research. Also, this is Apalachicola River. This was taken after Hurricane Michael, so also really understanding how increased disturbance, whether prescribed like fire or potentially a combination of human effects and natural phenomenon that are sort of changing the ecosystems that we're familiar with. So, the few years I was able to really do intensive research and work and collect in Florida, not that I still don't do that, but just more intermittently, taught me a lot. So here's my friend Alex. He has my camera because we were trying to get a pic of probably a ghost orchid or some sort of epiphytic orchid down in South Florida. And then our friend Lily Bird, Anderson Messick, took a picture of me in front of Sebaceae. This is Dodecandra, I believe, or used to be Bartramii. Anyways, it just, that pink is pretty wild to see coming out of the mud. So botany, of course, has kept me really sharp. Whether studying high elevation areas in the Linville Gorge area of the North Carolina mountains or the El Yunque National Forest in Puerto Rico, there's just so much to learn and keep your mind sharp for. Also, more recently in my position, I've been fortunate to not only, learn a lot more about our flora, but also how to teach about our flora. Hence why I'm doing talks like these. And then even more intensive workshops like this one that I led recently about a few weeks ago on asters, to just how do I de-asters in the Southeast, right? And it just was a lot of fun. Yeah, and they can be technical, but the good thing about these workshops, and I've taken them and I still take them, is they teach you a lot in a little bit of time. So let's say I don't know anything about dragonflies, I can go on some of these field trips and uh, come out knowing 30, 40 species easily. So really great as far as time. Can you hear those wind chimes behind me? Hopefully,
I
they're
can't
not.
hear them.
You
I
can't.
think
Okay, awesome. These headphones are working well then. I just want to double check. Okay. I'll just assume it's working well. Okay. So, and then again, just continuing on this theme of getting botany into the hands of people, not even people that are botanists, right, by trade. So this is from a Sedge ID workshop that's at a swamp 10 minutes from my house. And then, of course, in these workshops, I always learn a lot too. This is a soil scientist who was showing us some a soil core from the swamp we were walking in. Of course, our best teacher is just getting outside. It's just innate, right? We just are outside. We're appreciating. We're feeling it. It doesn't matter if it's 100 degrees or 80 or 60, right? I mean, that's about the range of temps in Florida, right? 60 to 100. No, I mean, I remember a few of those frosty nights, so it can get a little chillier, but just being out and sensing the environment and feeling it and feeling like you're more of a part of it as opposed to, removed, respecting, but still a part of it, right? So, the great thing about, and I'll talk just broadly about the flora now, the things that, we all kind of think about is, just the diversity, and taking an instance of longleaf pine for as a case study. So, longleaf pine, some of us are familiar with this species, have spent a lot of hours amid their towering beauty, right? So it has an interesting life cycle that's really influenced by fire, right? And so there's this really crucial time period between seedling, the grassier stage, and then between here with fire that controls how many longleaf make it to maturity and produce cones, right? And so there's all sorts of dynamics to study here, but it's a fun species just to respect as far as its basic biology. And we think some of these flat top longleaf that are still present in many parts of Florida, could be 200, 300 plus years. And of course, Gene Huffman and others have researched how frequent fire has returned in these habitats. And of course, that bolting stage is crucial for longleaf, right? It has to make it above the flames next fire. Longleaf, and that's a picture by Bruce Sorey. That's one of the few I forgot to credit that aren't mine. Sorry. And then Alan Kressler is this amazing photographer who has just taken so many great photos across the Southeast. And he also has a great sense of how longleaf communities differ, right? So longleaf sort of still is integral, but is less of a dominant in mountain habitat or ridge and valley where longleaf does naturally occur. But when you see it, it's just really kind of unique because it's not like the sandhills, right, where you're only seeing longleaf. This is probably about 15 minutes from actually where I'm staying right now. I'm doing some field work this week, which is why I'm doing this from this nice little porch here. This is at Broxton Rocks in South Georgia, and this is a part of the Altamaha Grit Sandstone Formation. Really botanically famous spot. Roland Harper frequented this area and wrote about it. So it's really a well-known spot among botanists, but again, different themes on longleaf sandhill habitat. Of course, longleaf can drop out too when habitats get a little dry, right? So xeric turkey oak barrens. This is essentially the scrub equivalent when you're out of Florida. So this is like, you'll see this, maybe not commonly, but you'll see this on the driest portions of the longleaf habitats in the Carolinas, for instance, and in Georgia. You're not getting rosemary like true Florida rosemary scrub, but you're getting these elements of a very dry pine oak mixed community. And then this is just fun. Like this is in Croatan National Forest in North Carolina in the coastal plain, and it's really fun to just see how pine communities can drastically switch with hydrology and elevation. So pond pine precosins, a kind of boggy type of habitat, peatland, and then longleaf pine sandhill ridges will often crisscross really closely. So these ecotones, these transitional areas between two distinct communities are really sharp, right? We have some communities that gradually transition, right? But in Florida, we all know, and in lots of parts of the coastline, we all know that those little bits of elevation can sometimes make a huge difference. And then worth a mention too, in Florida in particular, longleaf pine, this is a little bit more of an accurate depiction because we have some longleaf down in Southwest Florida, but it does kind of drop out of this part of Florida. Why? Because slash pine picks up, especially in the scrubby flatwoods, those drier, those xeric communities. And we do have, again, a lot of longleaf right here in the Sandhills region, kind of, north of Tampa, Brooksville Ridge and assorted areas. But for the most part, yeah, we kind of lose that plant and pick up slash pine, and then slash pine's also occurring through here, but South Florida slash pine that's been recognized at various species or varietal rank also becomes the dominant of the slash pine complex in Central and South Florida. So by the time you get down to the Keys, you can distinctly know you're looking at South Florida slash pine. This is also a dominant species just in general as far as our pine savannas. When you get into the scrub, the really dry habitats, you pick up sand pine, but in the mesic, the scrubby, the sort of intermediate, not super dry, and in fact, sometimes all the way down to wet, the wettest pine savannas are all dominated in Central and South Florida, really Central Florida in particular by South Florida slash pine. And then this is just one of those amazing views you get working at Archbold Biological Station. This was after a fire had escaped the nearby railroad and burned this maybe 6 months earlier, if I can remember correctly, or maybe 5. But either way, again, speaking to the resilience of these native plant communities. And then again, as I mentioned, you can see not only South Florida slash pine in places like Big Pine Key, but in many areas, well, the areas that remain, I should say, virgin. So not harvested. Why? Because this wood, is growing very slow. You have an edaphic, a soil character that's making these trees grow really thin, that exposed limestone, right? And so, it really wasn't attractive from a timber or lumber standpoint. Anyways, it's just really neat to see these stunted slash pine and think, okay, these have been here for some time, right? Hurricanes pending and all that, but still, it's really powerful to see these habitats. So this is from a really often cited paper, Guy et al. This is based upon Keeley and Bond work too. So there's been a lot of fire researchers, right, in North America and the Southeast, particularly in the American coastal plain, right, that extends all along here, right, down to basically North Mexico, especially in this part, right, where we pick up Florida and Southeast Georgia. You're getting a lot higher fire return. Now it's not black and white like this. There's a lot of gray areas, right? Not all parts of Florida would have been burning this frequently, right? But on the whole, on a landscape level, fires that even trickled slowly across the landscape, this is probably, pretty close to what we're seeing. And we know some historical accounts of botanists too. John Kunkel Small, Roland Harper, right? They wrote about these fires that they would see for miles when they were traveling through the state. And this was not that long ago. They were doing this in the early 1900s till, Harper into the 50s and Small passed in 38. So, they saw a good proportion of a century's worth of botany in the state. So Florida dry prairie burns pretty frequently, every 1 to 2 years, some of them probably annual, right? And we know this, it's a treeless landscape. I mean, trees just really don't do as well in frequently burned habitats, at least that frequent. And we also can take some hints from the dominant shrub or shrub palm species, right? These low-growing palms like Serenoa repens, saw palmetto, and scrub palmetto, Sabletonea, right? And there's some general idea of the fire return, but sandhills can vary. They can be more, or sometimes, towards that 3-year frequent interval, but generally in that 3 to 5 range. And then rosemary scrub, the really xeric open sand gap type scrub, maybe 12 to 60 years. And some of this is based upon just what I remember from working with Eric Menges, right, who studied these ecosystems for decades. And then, of course, the wettest, right? The swamps and the areas inundated for a lot of the year, the deep sloughs like the Fakahatchee, Big Cypress, even parts of Everglades, right? We're talking about pretty infrequent fire return intervals. And even in the dry season, this is like at the end of May in Fakahatchee, where there's no standing water in the deepest parts. I mean, we're talking about water going up to here, by August or September, right? The sort of end of the wet season. So even then, you still just have so much soil moisture and this thick pond apple litter. You're just not going to carry fire very well from there unless you really want fire to get in there. But it's a very damp, humid habitat, right? So just pulling back out now from Florida, the Southeast is such an interesting Florida study. Why? Because we have such varied characters, right? We have such varied things like elevation. These are both taken from high elevation parts of North Carolina. This is a high elevation bog right here. So some interesting plant communities can even be found that high up. At least communities that differ, right, from the general landscape. Again, this is from Linville Gorge, where I wish I could be climbing today, but nonetheless, I can remember the joy I've felt there just by looking at pictures, right? And this is an area that had burned. I wish I could remember, but it had been maybe within the past 5 years or so, and really unique to see the dynamics of how plant communities respond in this sort of part of the Southeast compared to Florida. Really unique soil and plant community interactions. These are the shale barren ridges of Virginia. And then, of course, in parts of the Ridge and Valley and mountains in particular, you get these really rich mesic, sometimes even cove forests that have such a different dynamic than the coastal plain, right? And you're going to get a lot of wildflowers that are more reminiscent of a northeastern temperate zone, right? This is Mertensia virginica, bluebells. Of course, when these variables combine, elevation and climate, you can get, it sort of determines where communities occur. So Dolly Sods, if none of y'all have been, I recommend it if you're going up through the kind of eastern part of West Virginia. This is a relictual part of the southeastern Flora, right? Because, it is from a latitude standpoint, it is further south, right? It's in that broader southeastern landscape, but because of its elevation, because of the dynamics that have maintained communities here, we consider it a relic, right? A relic of former colder climates. And so you can be standing in Dolly Sods, West Virginia, and feel like, in a way, you're up in Canada. That's what's really kind of fun, again, about the southeastern flora. And then, of course, elevation, and this is nothing new for Florida residents, right? Goes all the way down to sea level. So this is just pics from this is Baetis merita mud growing and coastal prairie trail, far south coast of Everglades National Park, pretty much at sea level. Again, we know this. There's lots of variation depending on the scale that you're looking at Florida. Lots of different communities recognized, soil types, hydrologic factors, water table levels. So, there's really a lot of things going on, but it's still the land of fire and water, right? So those two variables in particular have really shaped the state. I just love this picture. It makes me feel like I'm back down in Fakahatchee, but my feet are probably a little happier being dry right now. And then again, complete opposite, right? High Lake Wells Ridge, xeric, rosemary scrub. So, the land of opposites as well. And you don't just need to be on mountains, right, or things called mountains to know this, even though things like Sugarloaf Mountain are called a mountain, right? They sort of pale in comparison to, let's say, Mount Mitchell or something, right? And so they are still relative mountains, though, and you can still see this on the landscape. You can see where these sort of demarcated areas where ridges sort of start and stop. This is from Weakley and Mengus, I think 2007 or 8. And you can see this. You can drive onto the ridge and feel the excitement of, I don't know, 20 or 30 feet in, rise in elevation. Your ears probably won't pop, but you can still, again, experience this kind of fun little geographic thing. If you take 70 from Arcadia all the way to Archbold, which I did for a long time, well, not a long time, but I did for a while working at Archbold, you can, right as you get to the west of Archbold, before you even get to 27, you'll go up 70 a little bit. You'll be rising, and then you'll notice a change from the formerly probably prairies, but mostly cattle areas in the to the west, and then you're on the xeric ridge. So these are differences you can see within a short period of time of just driving. Okay, so okay, we're doing pretty good on time. So, that was just a fun, broad overview of like what I love and miss and hold steady in my heart about Florida, right? And there are times when I really wish I could still be doing field work or, botanizing or collecting or whatever it may be in the state because, it just from a biodiversity standpoint always stuck out to me. Just was always unique. And I'm not the first botanist to realize this, right? So to go over all that, I just want to take a step back and remind people about some of the work we're doing and why it ties into some of the things we know and love about Florida. So first, let's just back up and say, okay, let's all make sure we're on the same page about what a flora is. So, people can sort of colloquially refer to, the flora and fauna, right? But it's really, from our standpoint, it's at its basic level, an inventory of plants in a given region. So, for instance, Corrigan, with his advisor Walter Judd, did this amazing, thorough floristic inventory. They created a flora, a working plant list of Tiger Creek Preserve and saddle blanket scrub. So I used this a lot when I was living and working in Central Florida. It's really, again, very thorough. And you list literally all of the plants that you find. You can even describe how abundant they are. Maybe they're occasional or frequent or infrequent, right, or rare. But nonetheless, this gives us a sense of what plants can be found where. And then also from a slightly more technical standpoint, a flora is really a scientific document. It's, for many years, it's been books, right? It's been these heavy tomes that give you not only a list of plants for a given area, the Eastern United States, the Trans-Pecos area of Texas, or flora of Novi Angli, New England, statewide, region-wide, whatever. And not only gives you that list, but gives you a means of identifying those plants. And so, as technology has changed, as floras have aggregated, as new research has come out, new species have been described, right? All of these changes, floras are not static, right? They don't just, they don't just sit there frozen. And so floras can also be digitally maintained. And we do that, the Flora, the Southeastern United States project, the FSUS, I'll sometimes abbreviate. And then, of course, these digitally maintained floras can be converted easily to PDFs, which I'll talk about, and Flora apps, which I'll also talk about. So the basis for these databases, like for our Flora, for instance, is in this really cool Microsoft Access program that Michael Lee made from scratch. And he's been designing and modifying this since like maybe 2005 or six with Alan Weakley, my boss, and then of course just my two coworkers. And it's really dynamic, right? You can make changes on the fly. You can incorporate new findings. If I want to go in and edit the, add in the Myrtaceae, right? The myrtle family to the larger key to families, I can do that right now. And then it'll be available in the next Flora or update. We also do some of the intense things that not a lot of people, including botanists, either have time for or the patience for. So some of the nomenclature, some of the taxonomic issues. What is the proper name that we want to call this species, right? Sweet gum is a really simple example. Linnaeus published it as liquid ambar styrosophlua flua in 1753. We still call it liquid ambar styrosophlua flua in 2025. So some names have stayed pretty consistent. Many have not, though. And there are whole groups where the taxonomy is really complicated, like rubus, the blackberries. The distribution of plants too. So again, we can really dynamically modify these as new information comes in, right? Someone finds a new non-native or native plant somewhere, or a rare plant. Someone finds a plant that hasn't been found for a century in South Florida, like has happened with some of the orchids, right? So we can also sort of dynamically update these things in our Flora database. So we can also add in nice new field pictures of plants. This is my niece, who's now 5 years old, pointing at poison ivy, right? So a good little gestalt thing. We can also add in, I'm constantly adding in these family diversity photos, right? So these are all different types of seeds, achenes, and their associated portions of the spikelets from the sedge family, Cyperaceae. Asters too, so much diversity. I've been really on an aster kick this fall, as many botanists are every year. These are just some of the genera that we're familiar. This is Liatris olingeri, scrub blazing star, endemic to Central Florida. Verbicina chapmanii. It doesn't have ray florets, right? It just has disflorets. It's endemic to the Apalachicola area. So, and then this is always a fun one that I like pointing out. I don't know if anyone recognizes this, maybe some people from the coast, but this is from blanket flower, Gaillardia. When it produces seeds, or cypsily as they're called in the asters, it has this kind of cool fuzzy seed, the achene, and then the pappus, this little dispersal part that helps it to, attach to fur or whatever, looks like a crown. It's called coroniform. So it's just really, untangling some more of these structures and getting good images of them. So for so many years, they've just sat as either drawings, or we just don't have images at all. And then just comparing too with some of these diverse groups, Eupatorium, the thoroughworts, right? This was a pic taken just from one sandhill unit of the sandhills in North Carolina. So, you can get quite a few species in one area. And then again, these pictures help us to learn things like gestalt, leaf size, inflorescence shape. And then even down to the species variety or subspecies level too, we're trying to supplement better images. So this is a species, Quercus falcata, southern red oak. You see it kind of has a little bit more of this U-shape at the base of the leaf blade. There's also a hair color difference that's a little bit more subtle. And then pagoda or cherry bark oak, Quercus pagoda, has a little bit more of this cuneate or wedge-shaped, V-shaped leaf base. And so highlighting some of these subtle differences that have been mentioned in keys for years, but just with basic images, right? It's so easy to take a photo nowadays. I think it's improving our understanding of how to learn plants. And then again, even the pines in habitat aren't safe from the dreaded side-by-side shot, right? So we can get a sense of how pond pine, Pinus serotina, grows compared to longleaf pine, right? Especially if we have a photo of them growing side by side. So we can also, now that, and I'll talk more about how this is developed, but now that the Flora is a website and a mobile app, we can make those resources far more dynamic. So the key to gentians, which is maybe not a key that people think about a lot because the gentians are just so showy. Often there are other ways to appreciate or learn those plants, but there are still technical ways to know the difference between gentianopsis or gentianella or gentiana, right? And so these keys with good diagnostic images from all sorts of botanists across the Southeast, again, are changing the ways that botany can be learned. And then even for technical groups too, right? So the beak sedge is very diverse in the Southeast. I was saying at Carter Creek alone, it's about 20 species. That's just one site. You can get 20 to 30 species, through some sites in the southeastern coastal plain of just this genus alone. And yeah, they do look a little superficially similar sometimes. So you do need these technical differences to tell them apart. So with this Flora database too, we easily can convert this technical Flora data into a useful mobile app that's fit for field use or garden use or just sitting on your couch use, right? And so I'll talk now about kind of these products and how to harness them. I have a video that I might try to play a little bit of, but I'll allow us some time for questions too in the end. But again, these are the three main products. So the website, I won't go over in too much detail, but here are just some pro tips for people that want to explore the flora more. This is at fsus.ncbg.unc.edu. And here's just some of the sort of nuanced features of it. So again, illustrated dichotomous keys, so we know what the hell we're talking about. And then profile pages for individual species where you can quickly show them in the key. For some specialized groups like Carrick's, we have sections, so you can even see how that section keys. And then things like Great Places Botanize. This is also a feature available in FloraQuest apps. So feel free to explore these more, but also feel free, if you don't have FloraQuest, to download it for the one-time purchase of 20 bucks. And I'll talk about where you can get that in a second. But these are the 4 apps out currently. 4 apps in 4 years is pretty good. And this was our recent release in August. It was kind of a soft release, but this did take a little bit of churning out right at the end to get, but that's pretty good. About 19 states covered, essentially the flora east of the Mississippi now that is in mobile app form. And then this is just showing you the app that remains. So we're going to probably spend the most time finishing this, right? Because this has been the flora for the longest time. So radiating out is taking a little bit longer to key species, let's say, that only occur here or only down here versus, red maple, right, which occurs throughout much of the eastern US. It's already keyed. So really, it's just as the flora changes a little bit, as you transition to the sort of central prairies and Trans-Pecos area of the Southwest, we have to reflect those changes, right, in those dichotomous keys. This is where you can purchase FloraQuest Florida, and it's for both iOS and the Google Play Store. It's on Android. And we're currently trying to think of ways to customize and potentially add in purchase add-ins. So let's say, you might want to add in a new state to your current Flora app. So stay tuned for some of that, but we're still trying to figure out how we might do that. And then again, as a reminder, so this is a one-time purchase of $20 to buy the app. Meanwhile, it can get expensive to get actual floras, right? And so this is really a bargain compared to this one shelf in my office, right? That's probably, I don't know, 700. It's probably $1,000 or something. So, again, like this isn't like a cheat code to get into those. It's not a complete replicate of all those, but it pulls from so many different floras. So it's it's a pretty broad resource. Okay. So I will try to finish in like the next 8 minutes to leave about 10 questions. So I'm going to just give a quick tutorial here. So this is just, on the home app, open up the wrong one. Here we go. Let's go to Florida. Slowly going here. So when you open up FloraQuest Florida, it goes to this main page. You'll just always see this browse list, right? 5,000 plants and 21 species, native and non-native and waif in Florida. So this, you sort of live down here on the bottom menu. So here's the browse button. So you can just type in species here, common, scientific, family, however you like. You'll go up here to the settings to do geographic and sort filters. So I'll do that in a second here. It just hops around kind of quick. So let's say if you want to sort by family or common name instead of scientific. So yeah, you would change that up here after scrolling. Let's get through here a little bit. Okay, like I'm showing. And then let me just skip back. So when you go up to that geographic filter, that pinwheel I was showing up here, you can then modify what part of Florida you want to be in. So again, especially for like the graphic key, this is going to be really helpful to narrow your options and what species you might be looking at, what plant you're trying to identify. Okay, so then just remember, though, when you set that filter that it stays. So if you're wondering why a species isn't filtered, always double check that filter because you might have certain parts of the state filtered off, right? Let's say you're traveling to the Panhandle and you live in Miami. Okay, so that's that. So now in the graphic key, so again, I was just showing an example if you type in, let's say, Desmodium or something. So let's go over to the graphic key real quick. This lives right here, right? One option right to the right of the browse. And the graphic key is for, anyone to use. I use it quite often in the field. So it's an alternative to just the classic dichotomous key. And it's really helpful because you don't need to go through each option. You don't need to see, say, plants green, plants red. Oh, I can't tell what color they are right now because it's a drought or something, so I can't even make that first choice. Well, in the graphic key, the multi-axis key, you just answer what you know. So like here's an example of one that I did with I think yeah, probably gentians, but either way, you go to a group, right? Here's our wildflower dicots. And you could say, okay, it's growing in water. It's a floating leaf aquatic. Well, every time, sorry, this was an agentia. This was a different plant. Every time you select, you'll notice that this number often changes. Doesn't always change, but it'll often reduce that number. So you're starting at a flora of 5,000 and quickly whittling down by just learning a little. Oh, that went quick. Sorry about that. Okay. You still with me? Okay. Anyways, you can select all these options, and as you scroll down, you'll notice that this number will reduce. Well, eventually, you've gotten to a point where you say, okay, with an aquatic plant that has compound leaves and has petal numbers in 4 or 5, right? It's a dicot. Well, now I've gotten down to 4 options here, and given all of my options, especially pinnately compound, there's not a lot of pinnately compound aquatic plants. This makes sense that these are our options, right? These are aquatic plants like coontail. So this is just one, quick example showing you those 2 main sort of browse options and then graphic key. So moving on real quick, I'm going to just show you pics for the rest just in the interest of time because I have some good screenshots up next, but I could always play this at the end, let's say, as extra. So when you click on a species, like from that main menu, right? Let's say I want to look at pine lily. This is what you'll see when it comes up. You'll see the images first, right? And you can download these images for use remotely. Let's say if you have enough space on your phone, or if you don't have internet connection, if you're in some remote part of Florida, right, it'll show the first 2 images by default. So again, you can do that on the main menu by going up to the customized functions. If you go 1 tab to the right to description, this is where we have our habitat information. It grows in pine savannas, sandhill seeps, comments on the taxonomy. Here's our synonyms. And then if you go if you go to the range map, which you'll see in a second, if you scroll down on this description, you just couldn't see it on the last one, it'll show you the dichotomous key button. You can click this and it'll show you how that plant is keyed in all of the lilies, right? There are multiple lilies, so it helps to know the technical difference. And some of these keys have illustrations, like I mentioned earlier. And then on the range map here on the far right, this shows you where the plant occurs in the flora, and then you can decipher those symbols down here. And then also we have this INAT button now too, so you can just link right to your INAT. It just opens up your INAT basically from there to then make a picture observation and then see if it agrees with what your dichotomous key is telling you and vice versa, right? Okay, in that app too, there's a great places to botanize feature. This is the longest one. Why? Because it's for Everglades National Park. So Flora, the Southeastern United States, Flora Quest, Florida, great places to botanize, Everglades National Park. At this point, we're sort of sick of acronyms, right? But if you explore that last button, let me just go back here. When you open up the app, it's over here in these 3 little buttons down on the right. So that's one of the features. Okay. And in there, you can read, let's say you've never been to the Everglades and you're going there for the first time and you're a botanist or you're interested in plants, right? I spent a pretty good amount of time typing this stuff out. And so there's lots of information, but it'll give you a quick crash course on some of the spots you'll want to hit in that park. Here's just a breakdown of our products. I can't see the top because I have that. There we go. So the mobile app has some features that the other features don't and vice versa, right? But the mobile app is the only one that costs money. So it's that one-time $20 purchase. And then it also works offline. So if you don't have, if you're in a remote setting, the PDF also works similarly too. But the cost is down here. This line got bumped down 1. But again, the only one that's going to cost you anything is the app, and it's that one-time purchase. Okay, so I kind of skipped part of that video, but I think we have about 10 minutes left for questions. And then I also just have some fun picks at the end for, just as filler. But, I think I went reasonably brisk there, but not too fast. So if there's something that you wish I had covered more, then feel free to just drop some questions in. But
Great.
again, thank you to Florida Wildflower Foundation. That's what that's for.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. That was fantastic. We don't currently have any open questions, so if anybody has anything they'd like to ask, feel free to pop it in the Q&A feature right now. And we'll see.
And I also, and in the meantime, I can just skip to this last part. So when I was showing on the app, let's see where this, okay. So again, these are the 4 app regions, that how they're separate. So these are this is the More tab on the far right. So that's where you'll find like the great places to botanize. We're beefing up some of these resources too, like the glossary, but you know, a lot of information here to digest. And then I showed on this, there's this 3rd tab too that I skip sometimes because you can pretty easily get to the key through species search through the browse. But anyways, you can just also go right to a key in dichotomous keys. And then in this case, you know, go to genus and type in a genus that you want to identify a species in, right? So Solidago, right? Goldenrod. So this will bring you to the key, and you can just, if you want to visualize a couplet, you can, you know, say show all couplets. So this is a key where we have images that correspond to the couplets, right? To try to demystify it a little bit. Solidagos are very diverse. There's many goldenrods, right? And so, you know, it helps to know some of these differences. So I'm just, yeah, showing kind of how I'd run through that key in one instance.
Great. So we do have some questions starting to come in.
Okay, good.
Let's see. So is there a link in the app to an illustrated glossary? This questioner mentions that they love the on-the-fly glossary, but a full glossary would be helpful to search specific terms. So is there a link in the app, or is there a link you would recommend?
Yes, there is. And it's again in the, and as we beef it up a little bit, you'll see better images, but it's in this this extra tab here with the 3 dots. If you go there and then just go down to glossary, we have, you know, we have all of those listed. I don't think I clicked on it on this video, but oh, here also this is, oh, here we go. So this is what happens when I skip, I jump ahead of myself. So like right here, you can access the glossary and then just type in your term. And again, we're gonna have a lot more images as these are developed. Here's like, you know, I'm looking up strigos or strigolos, and then you can see if we have illustrations associated with that. So yeah, that's where you would access that.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
A question about how you refine your range maps. So is there any way for folks to contribute to your data set, or is all your data drawn from herbarium records and vetted databases?
So it is not only pulled from those classically used sources. So we can modify distributions really easily based upon sound evidence. So if an iNaturalist record, for instance, is able to be verified, then we'll use that as the basis, and we try to be specific. So I would, if I have to change for Magnolia macrophylla, for instance, in the South Carolina mountains, I'll go into the distribution statement and also, you know, cite the source of that information if it's not from an herbarium specimen. So not only those records, and we can acquire those pretty easily. So there's a feedback form on the website. It's, let's say if I go to the Magnolia page, right? If you just scroll to the bottom, you'll see like 4 little boxes. Let's say you have evidence, right, that you can provide for this species being present somewhere it's not listed. You can add that comment there, and then I eventually will incorporate those edits when I get to them.
Great, thank you. One question about how your app is different than other apps like PlantSnap. I think for me, primarily, it's that when you're using this app, you're not actually taking a picture of the plant you're looking at and uploading it like you are in like iNat or PlantSnap, but you're using the information in the app to whittle down what species you're looking at. Are there any other major differences you'd want to highlight?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I forget to highlight that sometimes. On the, let's see, so let me go to it. So I had the slide up, but that little INAT button, for instance, like you can use, oh, here we go. So if I'm on Pine Lily, you can link to those to at least one other app right now, iNaturalist. And we feel that there is some pretty good overlap in those two apps. One of them is obviously free, although they certainly accept donations, right? And the one deficiency in some of the recognition apps like Seek or iNaturalist is that you have to basically just rely on what it's telling you. And so the problem with that is that you can really fall victim to some really easy to avoid botanical mix-ups by just learning some basic botany. And so yeah, it does take some more time. And again, you don't always have to use the dichotomous key, and you can be using these other apps and go back to FloraQuest and then look up some of those technical differences to then, get sort of be better informed about the nature of what your plant is, right? And so yeah, that's the main difference. You're not just taking images, so you are putting in options in the graphic key, or you're following the dichotomous key instructions. And we're also evolving how these things are designed too. Like the graphic key, we're going to be adding in more values that'll be helpful, because when you get to that graphic key, let's say sometimes you're looking at grasses, right? So there's hundreds of species. Well, as we add in more characters, that'll help you to whittle down. But when it gets to those diverse groups, sometimes you do have to get a little bit technical, but I always come out of it learning more and sort of having it inherently inside my brain.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much.
Mhm.
There's a few questions about, you mentioned early on in your presentation that you teach some ID classes and that there may be some other classes available. The question is, where can people find information about any classes you might be teaching? And also, are there any online resources you can recommend, particularly regarding grasses and sedges?
Yeah, so, I wish I could allocate more of my time to the educational portion of my job. And I wish that some of the classes that the garden offers could be offered more regularly or even remotely. We do have some remote educational programs like for therapeutic horticulture, but part of botany really is experiential. So it really is being there looking at the plant together. And so it can be challenging sometimes to offer those to a wider audience. That said, like at the garden, for instance, we have a native plant certificate program. And so that's, just a small portion of my time is allocated towards the courses that I want to teach there that are also aligned with the certificate program. And there's there's all sorts of people doing cool classes and even making, educational content on Instagram, right? In the Southeast. And so, I would say as far as my workshops in Florida, they'll be limited as long as there isn't a demand. But if there's a large enough demand, then yes, I can physically be down and doing these workshops. Online resources, if you, let's say, can't take those and are interested in just maybe learning a little bit, definitely starting on YouTube. I think I've given a couple sedge talks for Florida. I did one while at Archbold, and then I think I did one with Florida native plant, like a lunch and learn. So go onto YouTube and type in, Florida sedges and see, maybe you'll find something. But in the meantime, I would say building a demand independently of me having to build it would garner my ability to come down and do more in-person workshops. So keep that in mind.
Great. And I did put a link in the chat box for folks who aren't familiar with the Florida Cooperative Invasive Species Management Areas. There's a few, SISMAs for short. There's a few that do host annual grass and sedge workshops. So I encourage you to check them out and see, I think mainly in Central Florida, but those are really in demand. So I know the SISMAs try to offer those at least annually. So that might be a good resource for training.
Absolutely.
Can you, did you, on the slide you had with the Everglades places to botanize, was that an example of the type of information that's shared in the locations to botanize section?
Yeah, so there's 24 sites. and we're going to add more. I keep other things have taken over, but for the app release, we typed up 24 sites, and so you can find that on FloraQuest. But this is one of the few features that are specific to the app that can also be found on the website. So if you go to fsus.ncbg.unc.edu, I know it's kind of a mouthful. If you go to the FSUS website, it's really easy to find now just on Google, and you're on the home page. You scroll down a little bit and you'll see a little blue box, and it has a great places to botanize. You can go to that and type in Florida. So that's one of those features that we wanted to make available for use online as well. And
Okay,
then
great.
yes, the Everglades one is like excessively long, but it's just such a massive park with so many different habitats. A lot of them are a little bit shorter, especially for the smaller sites.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. We are right at 3 o'clock. There are a few additional questions. I think, Scott, I might follow up with you on those via email, if that's okay.
Okay.
And we will get back to folks that have requested that information. And so, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone who hopped on and participated, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Scott, thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your fieldwork.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate everything you're doing. Yeah.